Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Brianne Bustos, CIO at CCMC. Bri, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past theirs. That's where Cyberlinks comes in. We partnered with the best cybersecurity companies in the world to be able to provide our clients with the best solutions at the best prices. So whether it's managed SIEM, SOC, EDR, MDR, XDR, you name it, we'll help you find the best solution at the best price. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Bri, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about CCMC and your role there as CIO?
Absolutely. So CCMC is what we call a large-scale property management company. We focus on what we call lifestyle HOAs. So our company manages the on-site communities that are some of your larger communities. For us as a company, we don't take any, for at least from our lifestyle and large scale, we don't take any resident or any HOAs that have less than 1,000 homes. And some of our communities have upwards of 20,000 homes. So you can think of almost like they're almost cities. And so it's really exciting. So you can imagine some of these on-site support staff have hundreds of people that work there, from maintenance to community managers to fitness and lifestyle folks. And we help manage all of that and then provide the software and services for that.
Fascinating. So what's that look like on the IT and the CIO side?
Surprisingly, I've been here since January in CCMC. We got recently PE backed, which was really nice because it helps us to really start modernizing our tech stack. So I've been here since January, and that has been my primary goal and focus, is really just bringing them kind of up to date and up to some of our competitors' speed on what they're doing with some of their software. So it's been great, but surprisingly, HOAs, what you don't think about is every single HOA is a nonprofit, right? So they're not making for profit. And so we are asked to do a whole lot with not a lot, right? Yeah. So depending on the size of the community, they could have a very large budget or a very small budget. And so we have to make sure that our software and services align with each one of those communities. And we have over 250 communities at this point. So it's been a really fascinating journey so far. This is my first foray into the property management group. So it's learning the business systems and the business along with how that technology fits into it. So a lot of the goals and what I'm working on right now is not only from a modernization standpoint of making sure that our systems are available to our communities and our residents, right? So we have historically had a really not great experience from getting in to even pay your bills. Luckily, we have a wonderful customer service team that will pick up the phone and answer it at any point in time to help you pay your bill. But not everybody wants to do that, right? We live in 2025 and everyone wants to pick up an app on their phone and they want to pay their bill and they don't want to think twice about it. And so we have to make sure that our technology starts scaling with that. And so that's really where we've been very fast and furious in the last 9 months. So, and as part of that is where do we do with our cybersecurity? What are we doing to protect all of our residents' data and all of our employees' data? Which is again, we're in one of those industries that we have no compliance regulations necessary. We are not bound to HIPAA or high tech or, even PCI compliance because we're not maintaining any credit card data. So since we don't have to be compliant to any of those, it's kind of just been winging it. So it's been a really strong focus in our cybersecurity standpoint as well.
Well, I think that really kind of sums up a lot of small business and even larger businesses when they don't have the regulations and they get left to their own devices. What happens? And a lot of times, I think historically, IT and especially security. But if you go back, 10, 20, 30 years, IT was always, an afterthought, and it was an expense on the budget that people didn't, you're not generating revenue, you're not helping the business. And I think it's been a long fight for all CIOs for the longest time, in the industry to get, the management to understand the value of IT. And now, and I think we've come a long way in that. I think people now value like, hey, if the internet's down or the computers don't work, you're basically out of business. But now with security, that becomes a really big issue. And I got to say, thanks to COVID and the ransomware that kind of
Right.
came out of that, I know it's messed up, but I think good things come from bad things, right? I really do believe that. And I think that's one of them. Ransomware really took off, during COVID. And now that's been such a great thing, I think, for the security industry because it got buy-in from everybody.
Everyone. Yep.
Everybody went
There was a
from
whole lot more eyes on it at that point.
absolute, yep. It
Right.
was like, oh, it's never going to happen to us to, oh, crap, that's happening to
Right.
everybody.
Well, and I think the biggest piece like that I am struggling with is how do I quantify the loss, right?
Yes.
Because we're not losing client data necessarily, and I may not be losing employee data, or I may not be losing anything like that. But the reputational damage that we would sustain if we were to have a breach of any kind, even if nothing even got out, there is a huge reputational damage to that you can't undo for years and years. And so quantifying that gets really hard down the line. So,
It does. And I think sadly, too often you hear about breach after breach after breach in the news to where it's people are becoming numb to it now, to where it's like, oh, you know what? Data's going to get out there, my stuff's going to get, and now it is this feeling of it's just going to happen. And so this too shall pass, which I think counters the whole idea of we need to be protective of it because maybe sure it's going to be reputational. We've been so good for so long. We're helping these communities. We want to keep we have a responsibility to them, but it goes even further in how do we operate if everything we walk into tomorrow morning and every computer is locked down and ransomed.
right.
What's that do to us operationally?
Correct.
How quickly can we get back up in all these locations and all that? What's that look like? And what's the cost? So
Right.
yeah, it might be a little egg on our face. We look bad for a while. People will forget about it, the 24-hour news cycle, sure. But what's the actual cost of if everything gets ransomed? Do we pay the ransom? How long does it take for us to get, all of the normal things?
Right. Right.
What's that cost?
Yeah.
So, and it's funny because we've had a number of CIOs on the podcast and we've had this discussion where the tabletop exercise with the first time I think we had somebody talk about this aha moment for the C-suite was they scheduled a tabletop exercise, got everybody together. They're like, "What is this thing?" And they were like, "I'll show you." And then it was just this role play tabletop exercise. And they're like, and and I think his first one he said was, we walked in today and all of the computers are ransomed. And they're like, well, and then they get on him like, what do you mean?
Right.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter why. Like the
Right.
point is that's where we are. What do we do? What's our process? What's it
Right.
cost us? And then suddenly it was like, okay, wait, what are the odds of this happening? No, it's right.
Yeah.
And so it's real
It's not
eye-opening.
nothing, right?
Yeah, it's not nothing. Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I like to, we're also in a really high growth area right now. We've just done two large acquisitions. What I like to tell them is where I really try to get to them is like, look, you guys have been private for a really long time and probably outside of an HOA space, nobody probably knew you. But now that we're private equity backed and now that we're buying other companies, that just increases the target on our back. So like you might not have
It
had a whole
does.
lot of visibility before, but you do now. And so
Yep.
now we got to plan for that.
Yeah, I love that. And it really does with the private equity. Now those
Right.
deals get announced. It's like, oh, money. And that's
Exactly. Yep. They're
that
like,
is the
yep, they
lightning
just got it.
rod.
We're fine. Let's do this. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
So
So, it's I actually I love when we have women CIOs on the podcast, and we've had a few, and it's always fantastic. Can you tell us your origin story? I like to think of us as superheroes. Origin story. How did you get into tech? What inspired you? Like, at what age did you like always know? Where how did it happen for you?
yeah, totally by accident. So I was in college. I was in my senior year of college, undergrad, and I was bartending. That's how I put myself through college at
Nice,
Applebee's. That's super exciting.
nice.
But I told myself at one point in time, I was like, I have to get a real job. Like, I'm not going to be able to get a degree, and then like, what am I going to do with it? I need to go get a real job. And so I had gone down to like the college advisory stores or a place, and they said, here's an internship at an oil and gas firm. They need somebody, an IT intern. And I was like, I didn't take any IT classes. This was, God, I'm going to date myself. 2001. So like, we didn't have IT classes back then, very, very few of them. And so I went and it was the IT director. He had one person in the help desk and he needed just an assistant to help him. And I got in there and he handed me an NT40 disk and he said, "Here, go build your own computer." And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what? Okay, but I figured it out and I was hooked from then on out. So I went from an IT intern into the help desk. Really loved networking and telecom. So it was right about the time where Cisco came out with all the VoIP. And so it spent several years rolling out several VoIP solutions, which was a lot of fun. And then moved to enterprise application support, which is wonderful. I've always loved that. And then kind of moved to director of IT and then to VP of IT and now CIO. So primarily private equity backed firms, or definitely my last three forays have been in recently PE backed firms. So kind of bring me in, help me modernize the tech stack, and then, see where we go. So. And I love it. I honestly, I fell in love with it. I think from that very first day where I built my own computer, I knew I was going to do this for the rest of my career. And it's just been a fabulous path. And I can say as a mom as well, I've got a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. And right after I had my oldest son, I was working as the head of enterprise applications. And I said, look, I just had a kid. I will come back, but only if I can work from home. And I fully expected to just be a stay-at-home mom. And they said, okay. And I was like, great, we're doing this. Big proponent of remote workforce and work from home. And it's just allowed me to have a really wonderful family time as long as a fantastic career path.
That's awesome. And it's fantastic that the technology has gotten to that point, right? Where it really, allows people that level of flexibility, being at home and then be able to have a life and manage that as well. And I think it's a little messed up that that it's primarily on women, the mothers to do that. And it's not like the guys are like, well, I'm having a kid, so I'm not going to be able to come back and unless I can work remotely, right? So it's unfortunate that I think that dynamic is so shifted. And you mentioned your sons. I've got a daughter who's in at University of Maryland studying cybersecurity. So women in technology is a big one for me. And so I'm kind of curious, what's your experience been, right? Because you got in the early 2000s in technology. I think the numbers probably weren't, that there weren't that many women. There aren't that many women now. There
Right.
must have been less then. What can you
Yeah.
tell us about that?
So, I spent 20 years of my life in oil and gas as well. So I have primarily worked in male-dominated fields in male-dominated industries. So, it's been it's been hard at times, to say the least, but it's been a passion for mine for so long, and primarily because I've worked with a handful of women, and even now there's not a lot of women in IT, but I think about the way that women's brains work, how we are constantly multitasking, how we are constantly, almost people pleasing. I think that is just in our nature to kind of do. We're kind of like built to do IT between the
Totally.
multitasking and the people pleasing and the just kind of advanced thought process through the whole thing and really seeing the big picture. Our brains are just kind of snap that way. And so I love it when I do, if I can reach out to colleges and start, get women, like even in like help desk or other those like smaller roles and help build them up because it's just phenomenal to watch them grow as well. But I actually did, so I've followed this pretty much my entire career and I'll go down rabbit holes quite a bit sometimes still. But when I got my graduate degree, I got it from Regis University here in Denver, Colorado. And my thesis, at the time I had just had my second kiddo and I was still working from home, which was great. I'd done my thesis on women in IT. And the numbers back then, so he's 13, so this would have been 13 years ago. Numbers back then were about 6% of women were about 10% of women in IT and about only 5 to 6% as female leaders.
Wow.
And I just started diving into this again because as part of some of my side work, I am on the executive advisory board for a nonprofit that focuses on getting women in just
Okay.
out of marginalized communities, which we can talk about too. But so I
Yeah.
started diving into this to see those numbers, even now, 13 years later, is still only about 10% of women in executive leadership roles in IT. And it's even lower when you start talking about cybersecurity. So for the longest time, there's pieces of it that are like, oh, I'll always have a job because of DEI initiatives. Like they're always looking for women to sit in IT. but it's not that easy because there's not a whole lot of us. And there tends to be somewhat of a stigmatism around it for whatever reason. And so I can't say I've got it harder than anybody else by any means. This is a hard role to begin with, but it's taken a phenomenal amount of work, and a lot of determination and grit to stay in it.
Oh, for sure. Well, I'd like to dive back into the numbers a little bit. You said it was about 10%, right? That were in IT and about 6% in leadership. What
Yep.
does that number look like now in IT?
We're about, I think, and they started breaking it out between IT and cybersecurity. So
Okay.
in IT in general, you're closer to the 35%, which is great.
Okay.
In cybersecurity, I want to say, I might have to look it up, but in cybersecurity, it was close to the lower 20s.
Okay. So
So
at least there's progress, but
there's progress.
we're
Yeah.
only about
And,
halfway there.
yeah, absolutely. And, you even see it like, but project management for IT might be like 50-60% women. So it's even within IT, the different sectors you'll see like the variances between it. So it's still fascinating to see.
Interesting. And it's funny because on the one hand, I think with the number of origin stories we've had on here, I would say the overwhelming majority of them have one of those, moments when they early on, when they first were introduced to tech, no matter what the age was, whether it was building a computer or doing their first line of code or solving a problem, that it was that moment was like, oh, this is cool. This is
Yeah, this is
fun.
it.
And
Yep.
that kind of ignited and the it ignited it and they were done, right? That was it. And so it was interesting to hear that from you, and I have to wonder, are we not seeing, girls at younger ages kind of is there a disparity in the early ages? Are they not having those experiences early on where they get to an opportunity to code in an environment that's fun and then like, oh crap, cool, I did this and it's fun, or I
Right.
fixed is there a
I wish I could say, so I have two boys, so I couldn't even tell you from the girl standpoint. I got blessed with two boys. And both of them went to a STEM middle school, and my oldest is involved in the robotics team, which is great. But in each of those school, like in the STEM school, in a lot of the math classes, the engineering classes, the computer coding classes, they're still primarily men. There might be like 25% as the girls. And going even into the robotics competitions that my son does, which is great. There is one girl on his team. One. That's it. And I'm like, where are all the girls? And he's like, I don't know. I was like, why don't you ask him to join your team? He's like, I don't know. Why are you asking me this? I'm like, because they would be really good at this. Why aren't you inviting them? He's like, oh my gosh, mom.
yeah, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I don't, I try to point it out to my kids because it's, they almost need somebody to be like, hey, come, let me show you this,
Yeah.
right? Because I had somebody give me that opportunity, and it just lit that fire that has never died, right? And so I don't know if women or girls don't get that same opportunity or that same invitation in. And so, I mean, for me, there was certainly not an invitation. It was, I forced my way in after a while because I was staying here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting because I don't know. Obviously, with my daughter, being already in that field, so she had a little bit of influence, and I think obviously that helped, right? Because originally she wanted to be an architect until I introduced her to coding, and then it kind of sparked that love, and she kind of built it from there and took off on her own. But I kind of wonder if it's not some sort of, social cultural,
Well, sure.
problem that we
Yeah.
have where we're not encouraging, we're not providing the same level of opportunities, or even at that they're, girls kind of when they're in a mixed environment with boys, they feel like they've got to act a certain way, when they're younger, and they don't want to be whatever. They don't want to look nerdy or geeky in front
Yeah.
of the boys because I don't know.
And I think it's that, and I think women also tend to, or girls even, and I see this, I can kind of do a little bit of tangent on one of my little side fun gigs, but they almost tend to learn a little bit better with other girls or other women
Yeah.
because boys tend to kind of push them out or be a little bit more competitive or, just it's just a different mindset for them. And so if you don't have other girls to help promote you and to support you, then you're just fighting a battle the whole time. And I see this even as adults. So I don't know what it is, but I wish there's probably a class in like trauma or something. But I tend to like really adrenaline-based sports, to the point that I love mountain biking. I love skiing. I love backcountry skiing primarily. I own a boat. I hydrofoil. I do all these like pretty much male-dominated sports. And so I have a side gig where I lead backcountry hut trips for women. I taught mountain biking to women for several years, and I can't tell you the number of women that come and say, I just wanted to be around women because being around men took some of the fun out of it. And so having like primarily women-based sports, even in this, felt safer for women.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a piece of it. Even as girls, like you feel safer with more women, but there's not a whole lot of them there. So you just don't have that same support system almost.
Yeah.
And so it's really having those like women or girl-based, clubs, I think would be really beneficial.
Yeah, no. And I have to wonder if it's not, I'm a huge supporter of sports in general. I think getting getting kids at an early age to embrace competition and
Mhm.
struggle and teamwork and all of those things that will serve them later in life, being a good, teammate, being a good sport, being a good loser, learning
Right.
from, your victories and your failures, right? The sports are just it helps in so many ways. And I think that as a culture, we've been very male dominated with our sports for so long. And it doesn't matter that boys can run faster and throw a ball further. Who cares? That's not the
Right.
point of the sports. 99.999% of those boys are not going to be professional athletes. So who cares? It's not the
Right.
point. The point is we need to also encourage that same level of aggression and competition and
Yeah.
everything in girls instead of it being like, well, you should be gentle and quiet and calm
Right.
and be
Yeah.
make people happy and be sit there and look pretty. Be like, what? No,
Yeah.
go knock them
Go,
down, right?
go
Go
Spitfire. Like, come on.
right. Spit fire. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I think encouraging that in the youth is really what they need, especially in a day where technology can be such a handicap in that it allows people to sit around and play games and sit on their phones and flip on
Right.
screens and not interact and not get outside and move and get competitive. So I think that sports are the answer to everything. No, I don't think
Right.
that, but I think
At
it's
least for fun.
certainly a good thing to start getting kids into. And I think that, that I think we need more of that. And I think that might help.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a lot of girls out there that are competitive. And so even thinking to my kiddos, robot club, it would be really nice to have like an all girls team, just like to really get that competitive spirit as well, because it's in there for us. Like we just
For
have to
sure.
dig down.
Yep. No, and I think it's a matter of culturally, kind of encouraging that and building it because I think that while most guys will say that, oh no, I'm for this. I think it takes more than just being, for something
Right.
to help it
Yeah.
grow. Like that's great, be for it, but what are you going to do to help make that so? And I think, one kind of helping to build those groups and teams and encourage, the young boys to encourage young girls to build those teams and compete and make that a, make that more socially acceptable and that be a good thing, not like
Right.
boys are better than girls. That's not the point, right? It's
Yeah.
not the point at all.
No,
Like,
no. We're
yep.
yeah. It's not about equals. It's not about better than. It's just about being, right?
Yep,
Like
exactly.
you gotta do something really amazing. And I think that's where, getting women involved in IT, it's a really amazing career path. For men and women. And it really does help on the female side if you do choose to have a family and that is the route that you want to take. And it's just, you know,
Yeah.
it's great. So
So, what can people do, right, to help this, right? So we've talked a
yeah,
little bit about the problem. We kicked around sports and everything, but real world practical application, the disparity in numbers, what are some things that we can do to help, move this in the right direction? If it's, I think it's already going in the right direction, but how do we speed
yeah,
this up and make sure that we reach this
yeah.
proper balance?
I think, well, I mean, one of the major, sorry, this is my kid. He's finally driving and he's driving today. So I want to make sure he's like leaving on time. And okay, he gave me his ETA because he's
Nice.
picking up his younger brother. And this just started this week. So I'm a little I'm being a paranoid mom right now.
True, but it's also very liberating when they start picking each other up and now you don't have to be the one driving. It's so
You
nice.
know, one of the biggest things that just come back to, I didn't own my first boat until I was 38 years old. And now I really like to take friends, and especially women friends, and teach them how to back up a trailer. And somebody will ask me like, why did you did you do this as a kid? I'm like, no, I just started doing this in my late 30s. And they're like, well, how did you get into it? And why? I was like, well, nobody told me I could when I was younger. Like, so nobody encouraged me to go, like, as a girl, you can be in IT, you can own a boat, you can play sports, you can do all of those things. Like, nobody told me I could. And I still think there's somewhat of that out there that we don't tell girls they can. Like, yeah, we say, oh, yeah, you can be anything, but, go be a doctor or a nurse or, which is all wonderful as well. But go do what is important to you, go what feels right for you. And if you find that passion, do it. And so I think there's still that, let's promote that. Like, let's really,
Yes.
and then the other piece is get involved, right? If you've got girls or even if you have boys, like, that's why I try to build it into them. Like, well, have you invited any girls to your robots club? Like, they're great. I guarantee they would enjoy it just as much. Like, absolutely. So, encouraging the boys to invite girls into those, and then just encouraging girls that you can absolutely do it.
Yeah.
So,
I love that because, that I think that perspective that you have of nobody told me I couldn't, and you just went and did it, right? You did it on your own. They didn't give you a manual on how to install the software, your NT 4.0. Just go do it. And so that spirit of just go do it, which is it's so IT. It's like a bit
yeah,
like at its core, that has been our history. That is what IT is all about. Just go do it and figure it out. There's no manual for the next technology and how
right.
we there's no roadmap for the future. We just do it and we figure it out. And so I think that's, well, typically a very kind of guy thing. I love that that was your approach to things. And I think making that the norm, for girls, little girls to be able to, like, yep, just go do it. You don't have to, it doesn't have
Right.
to be perfect. You don't need permission. Go do it and explore and have fun and try it and see what happens. I mean,
Yep.
that's how you get entrepreneurial success. That's how you get
Yeah.
success in anything,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
just go try it and ask for forgiveness later, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, oh,
Sometimes,
well,
sometimes,
sometimes you do, right?
absolutely.
Other times, like, yeah, you did it. It's like, oh,
And sometimes you epically fail, but the biggest lessons are in those. So,
that is exactly right. No, couldn't agree more. I think that's really good advice, and I think that's where we have to go as a culture. I mean, you look at some of the other cultures around the world, and it's becoming a sad place, for women in the world I think we tend to get on ourselves as Americans, like, as there's a growing trend of, and not to get political, but there is a growing trend of people who haven't seen the world from outside and seen what's going on, especially with women in other countries. I think it's alarming and shocking. And I think that we're kind of leading the way. As much as people want to complain, we're really doing quite a good job compared to
right.
the rest of the world. And so I think, for our success moving forward, it's going to take everybody kind of, instead of fighting amongst ourselves or even fighting, men versus women, it's how do we do this together? How do we make it to where boys and girls feel like equals and they treat each other equally, right?
Right.
And as equals. Sure, that doesn't mean that you
We're
you run
equal
at
in
the
all
same
areas, but
that
yeah.
you, exactly. Clearly, not everybody is equal. That's not the point, right?
Right.
But getting to the point where we're seen and treated as equals, with different abilities, different skills, different everything. Great. That's the point. And I think
Right.
encouraging the youth, to kind of get on board with that. But I think it takes people of our age and generation to be pushing that down to the young boys, to be thinking like that, to be acting like that, to be treating, instead of, you get that one a-hole making, making, the sexist jokes or the comments, oh, it's funny because he's, whatever. It's not funny, right?
Yeah.
And it's really, I don't know. Anyways, I could go on and on about this stuff, but I think that, the women in tech is it, and really the way that you go about it, I think is such a great example for young girls everywhere, is that's how you do it. So, I mean, we really need to get more of those stories out so girls can see, hey, this is fun. I can do that and be very successful at it.
It's been incredible, an incredible career, and I am actually incredibly fortunate now that the company I sit on, I don't think any of us planned this, but we have got a female CEO, a female CFO, a female president, a female chief accounting officer, a female chief marketing officer, a female CIO, and then I think we have two men on our entire executive staff.
That's great.
It's great. It really is just a
Yeah.
phenomenal team. And so to go from working with 98% men to the fact that most of my executive staff now is female has been a really amazing journey to see. So we're getting there.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And we are seeing it more
Right.
in those other, especially in the other areas of business, the other leadership areas. And it makes sense. I mean, it just does. It doesn't make sense that it should be so male dominated. There's so many more benefits to having a balanced workforce where you
Yeah.
get all the benefits of the diversity in thinking and acting it's so much better. And while that in some remote cases, in some cases, younger on, like you mentioned, it's not, sometimes it's a disadvantage to have girls and boys, together because it may make the girls feel, a certain way. But as they grow up and mature and are better, are stronger and more capable, in the workforce, it's so much better to have that combination to where you're now able to benefit from everybody instead of just
Right.
that singular, whatever it is, alpha male trait. Like that's one
Right.
thing,
Yeah.
right? That's not very, you're right. So no, I think that's fantastic. Um,
Yeah.
so you mentioned earlier that you also work with another organization.
I
And
do. It's actually, so I sit on a nonprofit. It's called the Milan Foundation. So it's really interesting that you talk about other countries. So the Milan Foundation started in India, it's still primarily Indian. They focus on helping girls, specifically girls in rural areas of India, with
wow,
training and educational purposes and also training and teaching family, to avoid childhood marriage. So
wow,
they do this through schools in rural India. I think they have three schools now in rural India. They have something called the Girl Icon Program. They started with 10 girls. They're up to 100,000 girls. These girls go through a program of education, learning. They learn about sexual health. Their being that, you don't have to be a child bride. You don't have to not go to school, right? Like in India, primarily the boys get all of the schooling and the education, and the girls may not. And the only thing left for them is childhood marriage. And so this program helps get girls educated and out of that, and so that they can finally start getting to this, they can get educations, they can go to college, they, can work through getting tuitions and grants and other things like that. And so it's really a phenomenal program. So I really love being a part of it. They have recently expanded into Uganda and then starting to work in some marginalized areas of the US too. So it's a really fascinating nonprofit to sit on. Really, all I do is help, you know, fundraise where I can with my connections and everything. But just being a part of it and, kind of helping guide some of that. And then, in any way that I can from an IT or cyber standpoint, I like to kind of go in and poke around too, because they are a nonprofit. So
yeah.
it's been a really great experience as well.
Wow. I mean, obviously, what a great cause. And I
Yeah,
would think it, when you think of the cultural aspects and the forces that are against you in that, I mean, it seems like,
great. I would have to look up the stats exactly on their webpage, but I want to say something like 38 or 40% of girls are still in rural India being child brides. That's horrifying to us here in the US. Like it's horrifying. So to be able to help get some of those girls out of that and realize that there's a different path in life is just a phenomenal cause.
yeah, when we say child bride, we're not talking about 17-year-old, who's not
No,
quite
13,
18.
14.
No.
Yeah.
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 That is some I don't even know how you would fight that. I mean, that seems
Well, and it starts with education. Even they go in and educate the fathers and the moms and the brothers and everything to really fight for the family and fight for the women, which is great. And it
wow.
also teaches them about reproductive health and right, like they don't understand periods. They may not have the necessary, any like pads, tampons. They may not have any of that, and so they don't know. And if you don't know, so
Yeah.
they just help educate on that. And so it's just a phenomenal program.
That's incredible. I
Yeah.
mean, and what a wild contrast between where we are in the
Right.
world here in the US and that. I mean, that is a spectacular disparity. And again,
Yeah.
yeah, kudos. I mean, that's phenomenal. And the fact that they're able to make progress with that,
Yeah.
you would think I mean, it's got to be incredibly difficult work and slow going, right? I mean, this
Yep.
is something where they're doing it kind of one-on-one? How do they even, how do you even go about implementing that?
That would be a question for Deandra,
Yeah.
who runs the nonprofit. Like I said, I really just primarily get to sit on the executive advisory board and say, I get to sit on this side, which is the easier side. They have the hard work of getting in the communities and educating and doing the work, opening the schools,
Wow.
yeah, mentorship programs, all of that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we will link to that below so that people can find out more information and help, if nothing else, donate some money to what an incredible cause. Wow, Bree, this has been fantastic. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you, about CCMC, and your favorite cause?
Sure. So CCMC is just ccmcnet.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Bree Bustos. I'm pretty sure I'm under Bree Bustos. I might be under my maiden name. I'm not sure. But yeah. And then the Milan Foundation is really milanfoundation.org.
That's fantastic. Well, Bree, thanks so much for coming on and sharing with
Yeah,
everybody. And
thank you.
until next time.
All right. Sounds great.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.